We're doing an experiment with hot water. Hot, only hot. So a rock right here. We're trying to crack up this rock. How should I show it to you? It's hot. It's hot. It's hot. It's hot. Ow. Can I teach you this? I need it. Got it. Hot water, cold water.
Now with the ice cubes you push them, they come back. Put pressure on them, put it up, then you start going. Well, I'm taking a video.
Cover this in here.
You're going to pour the hot water in there. It won't break it now. Take it easy. Whoa! Take it easy.
Hey everyone, welcome to my beautiful unschool life. My name is Erin. The last video that I posted, I talked about how not all parents are cut out for unschooling. Some parents need to see immediate results, and it doesn't make them bad parents. It's that we live in a world that conditions us to want to be able to measure and see the progress of our children. And in unschooling, you can't do that. So people who need that sort of the systematic progression, unschooling's not going to work for them. Now, there's another aspect of the sorts of parenting styles that work with unschooling. And in order to talk about that, I need to talk about a phenomenon called adultism. So adultism is a lot like a lot of the other isms. So sexism is rooted in the belief that women are subhuman to men. Racism is rooted in the belief that people of color are subhuman to whites. In the same way, adultism is rooted in the belief that children are subhuman, not fully human, and therefore not deserving of the same treatment, rights, respect that an adult would be. And I think that adultism is so pervasive in our society that a lot of people just laugh when you even suggest that young people are oppressed because of their age. I think a lot of that comes from the fact that we were all young once. And I think it also comes from the fact that we don't really remember being young very well. I'm just editing this video and I've thought of a couple of more things that I had wanted to say that I didn't. So I'm just jumping in to add. I read once that empathy is easier when you feel like you have something in common with the other person. And I think maybe that because our childhood is so different from our lives now, that we don't feel things in common with children anymore. And it's become very hard for us to be empathetic with children. So it's very hard for us to put ourselves in their shoes and imagine how we would feel if we were treated the way that they're being treated. Imagine you made a mistake at work and your boss made you go sit in the corner until you thought about what you had done. Imagine if you accidentally hurt someone and they demanded that you say you're sorry. Imagine if someone told you that you had to eat all the food on your plate or you couldn't leave the table. How would you feel if someone did that? If you made a mistake and someone publicly berated you in front of all of your friends and embarrassed you, would that cause you to make fewer mistakes? Or would it give you anxiety and make you nervous and cause you to make more mistakes? Once I was at a public function, and a woman said to her 16-year-old son in front of everyone, "You stink. You need to shower more." Like, can you imagine how humiliating it would be if someone said that to you? It would make you feel horrible. It would make you feel this big. Yet for some reason, people think it's okay to speak like that to children. So if you're reading a parenting book and it gives you advice, I want you to just for a moment imagine that your spouse did that same thing to you. And imagine how you would feel. And if it would not cause you to improve your behavior, if it would just create tension in your relationship, then it's going to do the exact same thing if you do that with your child. Also comes from the fact that we don't really remember being young very well. But the things that happen to you in your childhood are what shape who you are for the rest of your life. They're what shape the neurological pathways of your brain, and that shapes your personality and your ability to cope and your social skills, and really everything about who you are comes from how you're treated in your childhood. So it's really messed up that is when it's almost universally accepted that you can treat someone as less than a full human. People tend to think that you need to control your children or else they will control you, which is a really unhealthy way to look at relationships. Relationships aren't about control. They're supposed to be about respect and compromise and communication and love and compassion. So it's really messed up that the first relationship we have in our lives is often one of control and dominance. This narrative that you either control your children or they will control you is based on this flawed understanding of parenting styles. It suggests that there's only 2 parenting styles, but actually there's 4 parenting styles, and I can talk about them a little bit. This is a continuum. It's not, you choose one style or another. Most of us move between different styles, and it also depends on, there's certain things that we want to control more because it was out of control for us, or that we control more because our parents controlled it for us, so on and so forth. Authoritarian parenting style is the most controlling. Authoritarian parenting is parents saying, because I said so. It's a top down. I make the rules, you follow the rules. As long as you're in my house, you follow my rules. Until you're 18, you belong to me. That's authoritarian parenting. It uses fear as a form of control, a fear of punishments. One of the punishments that is used in authoritarian parenting is a time out. And it's been sort of presented to us as a more peaceful alternative to spanking, but it's still punishing children. It's still saying, if you can't meet my expectations, I won't love you. Like you go in a corner and you be by yourself. You are not acceptable to human interaction because of your behavior. And that's a really harsh punishment. So when talking about rewards and punishments, it's really important to understand the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic. Intrinsic is more about natural consequences. So I understand that when I made this decision, it made the people around me sad, and I don't want to make people sad. So I'm going to try and do better. Whereas extrinsic is about, if I do this thing, I'm going to get a candy, and if I do this thing, I'm going to get put in the naughty corner, so I'll do this thing. Extrinsic rewards only work when there's an authority figure present. Intrinsic rewards are something that I values that I hold within myself. And so even when I'm alone, I can still make good choices because it's something that I believe in. Authoritarian parenting It does not acknowledge children's emotions as valid. It's parents saying, don't cry. It's parents saying, don't be sad, you know, telling you that your emotions are wrong. And it's also parents not responding to emotions, so ignoring crying, ignoring sadness. And a lot of the times we do that not because we're cold, heartless people. It's because we were taught to ignore our emotions. And so it triggers us when other people have emotions. We don't want to see people cry because we've been told that we shouldn't cry. And so we get angry at people for crying because it makes us uncomfortable because we've been conditioned to believe that it's bad. The next parenting style on the continuum, authoritative parenting, which is one of sort of much more give and take. So it's like, I am the adult and I do have the final say on things, but I care about your feelings and I'm willing to budge on the rules if there's good reasons, and all the rules exist for a reason, and we can cooperate and come up with a system that works for everybody. Authoritative parenting acknowledges that emotions are valid. So, like, I understand that you're upset about this rule that exists. Unfortunately, the rule still has to exist. It's okay for you to be upset with it, and your emotions are valid, but that doesn't mean that the rule changes. Authoritative parenting doesn't use timeouts. They use something called time-ins, which is more, let's sit down and let's talk about what happened. Let's talk about what you did. Let's talk about how that affected the people around you. Let's talk about how you could have done it differently. Timeouts are very much about shame. You're a bad person and we don't want to be around you. Whereas time-ins are more about guilt. You did a bad thing. These are how it affected, these are the consequences of the thing that you did, but you can do better, and we're going to help you do better. So there's a really big differentiation between shame and guilt. So the other two parenting styles are permissive, which is, I would say radical unschooling really falls under permissive, which is just sort of like the kids get to make the rules and the kids get to decide pretty much everything. And the parents are there to sort of, you know, support them and respond to their emotional needs. But other than that, the parents are hands off. The final type of parenting is when the parents don't respond to emotional needs and the parents don't make rules. It's basically, I mean, we used to call it neglect. So I would say that in our society, authoritarian parenting is the most common. And it's really based on this expression, do as I say, not as I do. But people forget that children learn from watching and copying. That's how children learn. If you think about how we lived as hunter-gatherers for generations upon generations, it was the children were raised in the community watching everyone around them and watching everybody's jobs and watching how everything ran, and then the children would copy those activities in their play to the point where eventually the children were able to do the activities in real life. Unschooling is entirely based upon this fact that children learn by watching and copying. So if you're raising your children with methods of control, they're watching and copying your methods of control and your manipulation. And then they will take those methods of control and manipulation and use them in their play with other children. Now, of course, children will use these methods in their play anyways. But if it's being reinforced in the home, then it will become very dominant in their play. So you get children saying things like, you know, if you don't share that toy with me, I won't be your friend. You get them saying things like, if you don't do that, I'm going to tell on you. You get children disciplining each other with physical violence. Authoritarian parenting doesn't work with unschooling. Because you need to be able to respect your child as a human being whose value in society, whose opinion, whose thoughts, and whose feelings are equal to yours. You need to believe that your child has a say, that your child is competent, that your child deserves autonomy, and that your child deserves a healthy, respectful relationship. Those things are not offered by authoritarian parenting. For sure, authoritarian parenting is easier, and it gets immediate results. If your kid is afraid of getting smacked, they're going to sit down and they're going to shut up, right? But in the long run, your child isn't learning why they really need to do that behavior. They're just avoiding a punishment. Your child isn't learning how to communicate with other people, to explain consequences of actions. Your child is just learning that the person with the power makes the rules. And then for the rest of your life, your child will try to be either the person with the power making the rules, or they will be the person without power being controlled. Be it with manipulation, physical violence, emotional violence. The way that authoritative and permissive parents parent is much more difficult. You have to be creative. You have to be really inventive with your solutions. You have to find compromise. You have to listen. You have to care. You have to make space for someone else's feelings and try to encourage them to make space for your own feelings. You have to be open about your own feelings, which a lot of the time parents have a hard time doing with their children. You have to be able to negotiate with them in a non-manipulative, open manner. And in a lot of cases, we have to break patterns that were taught to us by the society that we grew up in. So it is really hard to parent this way. And especially when I'm tired or when I'm overstimulated, I find it almost impossible. But it's something that I need to work on, because this is parenting for the long game. This is parenting for, I don't want immediate obedience from my child. I want them to grow up to be a well-developed, functioning, healthy adult who feels like they have control over their life, who feels like they're competent, and who knows what a healthy relationship looks like. And I think it's particularly important for this generation. A lot of people imply that the children growing up now have no discipline because they're not being spanked. They have no control. But I would argue, actually, especially in North America, the children of this generation are more controlled than any generation in human history. We never leave our children alone. When we do give them unsupervised time, we leave them under the supervision of a television or a video game, which was designed by people in order to elicit certain behavior out of children. You know, when we send them to daycare, their entire day is structured. When we send them to school, their entire day is structured. Children these days, their entire lives are controlled by adults. We even design their play dates. You know, gone are the days of children just running out into the neighborhood and playing with the other children of the neighborhood and then coming back at dinner time. These children are more controlled than any children have ever been in their entire life. How are they ever going to learn autonomy? How are they ever going to learn a sense of control over their own destiny? How are they ever going to develop healthy social skills if they're never allowed to practice them? There's a final note that I want to make, and that is, I really want you to not beat yourself up if you have been using authoritarian parenting techniques, if you have been using reward and punishment and manipulation. Please don't feel like you're a bad parent because you've done this. You're doing the best that you could with what you were given, with the society that you were raised in, the parenting that you received, the advice that you were given. You're doing your best. But as you learn more about how children's minds work, how we develop, as you learn more, you can do better. So don't beat yourself up. When I was talking about the difference between shame and guilt, I don't want you to feel shame for the way that you've parented. You're not a bad parent, but you can feel guilty. You know, you made choices that weren't the best, but you can do better. You can do better. You can learn more, and you can try harder, and you can try new things, and you can do better. You're not a bad parent. So be compassionate with yourself and be compassionate with your children. And thanks for hanging out with me. Take care. See you next time.